Can you imagine living in a space so small you can't even stand up for over a year? Not for a challenge, not for a dare, but for your very life. Today, I want to share the incredible, true story of the Schmidt family, a testament to human resilience in the darkest of times. The year is 1943. The world is engulfed in the chaos of World War II. For the Schmidt family, father Carl, mother Helena, and their two young children, Anna and Luca's, life in their small town had become a nightmare. The constant threat of patrols, the deafening sound of air raid sirens, and the ever-present fear of being discovered was their daily reality. Their only crime, helping their neighbors, people who were being hunted simply for who they were. One evening, a close friend, a local baker, burst through their door, his face pale with terror. "They're coming," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They know you've been hiding food for the fugitives. You have to disappear. Now." Panic seized them. Where could they go? The borders were sealed, the roads watched. Running was a death sentence. It was Carl, a carpenter by trade, who came up with a desperate, audacious plan. Underneath the floorboards of their own living room, there was a small, dusty crawl space, originally meant for storing potatoes and winter preserves. It was barely 3 feet high and just large enough for the four of them to lie down side by side. It was damp, dark, and filled with spiders, but it was their only hope. That night, under the cover of darkness, they worked frantically. Carl pried up the floorboards, creating a hidden trapdoor beneath their heavy wooden dining table. Helena gathered what little they could, a few blankets, some jars of water, and a sack of dry bread. They told their children, Anna, who was only 8, and 6-year-old Lucas, that they were going on a secret adventure, a game of hide-and-seek they had to win. As the first light of dawn broke, they heard the rumble of military trucks on their street. Heavy, booted footsteps stomped up to their front door. With hearts pounding in their chests, the family slipped one by one into the cold, dark earth beneath their home. Carl carefully lowered the trapdoor, plunging them into absolute blackness. Moments later, they heard their front door splintering open. The soldiers were inside. For what felt like an eternity, they lay motionless, holding their breath. They could hear the soldiers' voices, guttural and angry, just inches above their heads. They heard furniture being overturned, glass shattering, and their belongings being ransacked. Lucas started to whimper, and Helena pressed his face gently into her coat, muffling the sound, praying it wouldn't betray them. The footsteps stomped directly over their hiding spot. A heavy boot kicked the leg of the dining table right above them. The world stood still. Then, after an agonizing silence, the voices faded, the front door slammed shut, and the trucks drove away. They had survived, for now, that first day bled into the first week. Their world shrank to the size of that cramped, lightless space. Time became a blur, marked only by the muffled sounds from the world above. They learned the rhythm of the occupation, the morning patrols, the midday quiet, the evening curfew bell. They spoke only in the faintest whispers. A single cough, a sneeze, could mean discovery and death. The physical toll was immense. Their muscles ached from the constant crouching and lying down. The cold, damp air seeped into their bones. Rations were dangerously low. They measured out their food crumb by crumb, their water sip by sip. Hunger was a constant, night companion. But the psychological strain was even worse. Imagine the sheer mental fortitude it takes to keep 2 young children quiet and calm in such conditions. Helena became a master storyteller, weaving tales of magical kingdoms and brave knights in hushed whispers, creating a world of fantasy to shield her children from the horrifying reality. Carl would use his fingers to teach them math problems on the dusty ground, trying to maintain some semblance of a normal childhood. They played silent games, communicated with hand signals, and found comfort in the simple act of holding each other in the dark. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. They lost all track of the seasons. Was it summer, winter? They could only guess by the intensity of the cold that seeped through the ground. Their bodies grew weaker, but their senses became incredibly sharp. They could identify different soldiers by the sound of their footsteps, distinguish the rumble of a supply truck from a tank. The world above was a soundscape of terror and survival. There were moments of sheer, heart-stopping fear. Once, a water pipe directly above them burst, flooding a corner of their tiny sanctuary. They used their few spare rags to frantically soak up the water, terrified the leak would be noticed by the soldiers who had since commandeered their house as a local barracks. They lived with the constant sound of their enemies walking, talking, and even sleeping just feet above them. Another time, Lucas developed a raging fever. His small body was hot to the touch, and his delirious cries were almost impossible to contain. Helena held him for 3 days and 3 nights, rocking him, whispering to him, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth, and their last precious drops of water, praying for his fever to break before his sounds gave them all away. Miraculously, he recovered. The silent tears of relief they shed in the darkness were a testament to their fragile, yet enduring hope. Their survival depended entirely on the baker, the same friend who had warned them. Once a week, under the cloak of deepest night, he would risk his own life to leave a small package of food and a jug of water by the loose cellar window at the back of the house. Carl would have to crawl out of their hole, slither like a snake across the cold ground to the cellar, retrieve the supplies, and crawl back, all in complete silence. Each trip was a gamble with death. One night, the baker didn't come. A week passed, then another. Their last crumbs of bread were gone, the water was finished. Despair, a foe more dangerous than any soldier, began to creep into their hiding place. Had their friend been caught, were they now truly alone, destined to perish in this cold, dark tomb? It was in this darkest moment that young Anna, her voice barely a whisper, started to hum a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. It was a simple, hopeful tune. The melody, faint as it was, cut through the oppressive silence and reminded them of who they were, a family. It rekindled a tiny spark of hope in the crushing darkness. They held on for another 3 days, weak and dehydrated, drifting in and out of consciousness. They were ready to give up. Then they heard a new sound from above. Not the harsh, guttural language of the soldiers, but voices they recognized, voices of their neighbors speaking their own language. Cautiously, Carl pushed at the trapdoor. It wouldn't budge. Something heavy was on it. He pushed again with all his remaining strength. The trapdoor creaked open a few inches, and a blinding sliver of light pierced their darkness. They had not seen daylight in 12 months. A face appeared in the opening. It was the baker, his face gaunt but smiling through tears. "It's over," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're free." The soldiers had retreated. The town was liberated. Slowly, painfully, the Schmidt family emerged from the ground. They were pale, emaciated ghosts, their eyes unable to handle the brightness of the sun, their legs barely able to support their own weight. They had spent 365 days in a hole beneath their own home. The story of the Schmidt family is not one of grand battles or heroic charges. It is a story of quiet, desperate courage. It's about the strength of the human spirit, the unbreakable bonds of family, and the profound will to live. It reminds us that even in the most profound darkness, a tiny spark of hope, a whispered story, or a hummed lullaby can be enough to see through to the dawn. Their legacy is a powerful lesson in resilience that we should never forget. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible story today. If you found this as moving as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories of survival and the human spirit. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.